right now we are currently streaming this case study that we, as usually, we discussed and we were going on. So last we discussed till I guess 32 pages, I guess. So right now we are going to kind of just let me have a good setup for myself first. Mhm. Okay. So yesterday we discussed all these questions, and we were left. We were to start from the household questions, right? From here, 37th page. Just a second. All right. So household questions. There are times when you will want to break down the 100 million US households by income level. So according to a graph published in the Wall Street Journal in the summer of 2016, approximately 30% of US households are high income, 50% are middle income, and 20% are low income. So how many televisions are there in the US? Draw or design a chart and fill it in as you go along. So break households down by income levels, assign the number of households per income level, make assumptions about the number of TVs at each income level, and total them up. Add to that total an estimated number of non-households owned TVs. So as you understand and you're moving along, you have to do this assignment in order to, to answer that simple question. So now I'm going to break the US market size down by, okay, what's going on with my screen?
With over 8
Oh
million
my God.
broadcasts and over 600 million viewers engaged monthly,
No.
Restream is the #1 tool.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry for that. Okay. So I'm going to break the US market size down by household incomes, high, middle, and low. I'll assume there are 30 million high-income households, making up 30% of the total US households, and they have on average 3 TVs per household. That makes 90 million TVs. So middle-income households make up 50 million homes, or 50%, and they average 2 EVs. So that leaves the total income households at 20 million. I'm going to estimate 1 TV per household, or 20 million. So as you can see, there is a chart that is giving us income households and number of TVs and the total number of TVs that they have. So there are 30 million households, 3 TVs each, that makes 90 million TVs. Then 50 million TVs in middle income households, and they have 2 TVs on an average, that makes 100 million TVs. And then there are 20 million households with low income, and each have 1 TV on an average, and that makes 20 million TVs. So that gives us a total of 210 million TVs. So review the answer to see if it makes sense. So if it doesn't, adjust the answer but not the process. So because it seemed to make sense, I'll add another 20 million non-household TVs to the count. That 20 million takes into account TVs found in schools, airports, hotels, hospitals, nursing homes, restaurants, and sports bars. That gives me a total of 230 million TVs in the US. So where did I get the 20 million non-household TVs? I pulled it out of the air, but I justified it by naming the venues that make up that number. So you may want to add that number of TVs might have been higher, but today many people watch TV on their computers or tablets or even phones. So how many garden hoses were sold in the US last year? Next question. So determine the US population and break it down by household. Estimate the number of households in the suburbs and in rural areas. Calculate the number of those households that have a yard and are in need of a garden hose. Add in businesses that use garden hoses to get a total. Estimate the life of a garden hose. Assumptions: 320 million Americans, 3.2 people per household, thus 100 million households. So I'm going to estimate that 50% of the households are either suburban or rural. That makes 50 million households. I'll assume that 20% of those homes are apartments or condos. That narrows us down to 40 million households that most likely use a garden hose. Garden hoses are relatively inexpensive, so people are likely to have two hoses, a hose in the front yard and a hose in the backyard. That makes 80 million hoses. To that number, I'd like to add another 10 million hoses, which can be found in nurseries, zoos, and other outdoor facilities. Most of these businesses have at least two hoses. We are now up to 90 million garden hoses. Hoses are replaced every year. I'd say that they are replaced every 3 years, unless they run into the business end of a dog's tooth. So we take 90 million hoses, divide that number by 3, and come up with 30 million garden hoses sold each year. Worldwide market sizing questions. Whenever you get a worldwide market sizing case, don't start with 8 billion people and whittle your way down. Instead, pick any country, pick one country, make assumptions, and then extrapolate out. So how many wearable units will be sold worldwide this year? Smartwatches or fitness trackers, etc. So pick one country, for example, US. Determine the number of units sold in that country and extrapolate out. Assumption: the US makes up to 10% of all wearables sold. Population of the US is 320 million. Assume even distribution among the ages. Estimate the number of units bought by generation. Walk the interview through your thought process for each generation. Population 0 20, 80 million units sold, 2 million, this and that. We have the table total of 320 million population and units being sold as 25 million across all the ages. If the US bought 25 million wearables that make up 10% of the all units sold, then the number of wearable units sold worldwide is 250 million. Right? All right. Now, prosperous cases. Prosperous market sizing questions are usually standalone questions. These are asked not only to test your math skills, but also to see how you handle the episode. The best advice is to roll with the punches, do the best you can, but have fun with it. Interviewers love people who love solving problems, so keep a sense of humor and attack it logically. These are questions like how many jelly donuts fit into the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or how many slices of pizza does it take to reach the moon, or how does a 747 weigh. I would be shocked if you received a prosperous question from a consulting firm. These are often given by companies that don't have a lot of practice or skills in given case questions. So it's a little scary to think after how many years of school that your job comes down to a question like this. So factor questions. Factor questions usually start with what factors influence or what key issues would you consider when factor questions are gaining popularity, particularly with non-consulting firms such as Johnson & Johnson, Coach, Taco Bell, and Amazon. Which use cases when interviewing for finance, marketing, or supply chain analysts? Factor questions are used when time is short and interviewers can't devote significant time to walking you through an entire case but want to see you think in broad strokes. They may also pop up in place of standalone market sizing questions during first round interviews. Factor questions last 5 to 10 minutes, where a full case could last up to 40 minutes. The interviewer is not only looking for the factors, but in what order do you present them? Do you just see them as the pop into your head, or do you prioritize them in your mind first? You can ask for a minute to think. Even though these questions are more conversational, the firms are still looking for the four key things: structure of thought, confidence level, communication skills, and creativity. Things: structure of thought, confidence level, communication skills, and creativity. Some questions might require a recommendation. If so, state your recommendation and then mention the risk and next steps. Examples might be Johnson Johnson. What factors influence the revenue potential of a new drug? Taco Bell. Marketing is suggesting that we add French fries to the menu. What are some of the key issues to consider? Amazon. We are thinking of putting a new distribution center somewhere in the Midwest. Where would you put it and why? Let's take a look at a J&J question interview. What factors influence the revenue potential of a new drug? Candidate 1. I want to look at two main factors: price and volume. Determine price. I want to look at the company objective, competitive analysis, cost-based pricing, and price-based costing. I'd want to know the R&D cost, the FDA test trail cost, and any startup cost, which retooling a factory and access to raw materials. We would also want to look at government barriers and regulations. Is this an over-the-counter drug or prescription drug? With an OTC drug, there will be packaging, marketing, and distribution cost. I'm thinking higher volume, lower price count, lower price point. In the presentation drug, we are looking at lower volume but high prices. Will it be covered by health insurance? The client would still have marketing and distribution costs through a sales team visiting doctors. As far as volume goes, what is the market size? Is it growing or declining? Who are the competitors? What market share do they have? And how is their drug different from ours? I'd also look at the seriousness of the illness, the length of time the drugs need to be taken dosage, and the number of times per day. Are we talking about a cold medicine or a statin that would need to be taken for years? Other things to consider would be the effectiveness of the product, side effects, brand loyalty, and whether we've had any endorsements or trade journal coverage. Interviewer, nicely done. In a perfect world, your answer would sound like that. But if you could have gotten half of that, the interview would be impressed. Written group case and test. Over the last couple of years, more and more firms have turned to written cases, particularly in the second and third rounds. Merger was the first to pioneer the written case. Since then, firms have added a few new twists to the process. The interview can go something like this. Scenario 1. You arrive for the interview and are handed a written case, usually about 5 pages, 3 pages of text, and 2 pages of charts. You're given 20 to 30 minutes to read and take notes. When your time is up, a consultant comes into the room and you are expected to present the case much as you would in the business school cases. More often than not, a discussion ensues. Chances are you will be touching the same points you would if you were given a verbal case. Scenario 2. The interviewer hands you a written case, usually 3 pages. You are given 30 minutes to read it, take notes, and draw up 3 PowerPoint slides to go along with the case, one of which needs to be a chart. You have no calculator and no computer, which means no PowerPoint or chart wizard, just 3 plain sheets of paper. The consultant comes back in and you present the cases as you would to a client. Scenario 3. Alternative 1. You're sitting in a conference room, a consultant comes in and gives you a deck of 25 slides. You're expected to reduce the deck from 25 to 7 slides and then produce one additional slide with the recommendation containing why you choose your solution and what the risks are and next steps. Alternative 2. You're sitting in a conference room, a consultant comes in and gives you a deck of slides and a question. You are to analyze the slides and come up with 2 more handwritten slides, one that has a recommendation on it and one that has your rationale supporting evidence, basically the defense of your recommendation. Group cases are also becoming more and more popular. Scenario 4. You are sitting around a table with 3 other candidates all going after the same job. The interviewer throws a case out of the group. How do you respond? The interviewer is most interested in how you interact with your peers. Are you kicking your competition under the table, elbowing them in the gut, talking with them to get your point across? If you are, the shame on you. The interviewer wants to see if you play well with others. You're going to be working as part of a team. And even though other candidates are your competition, for this one moment in time, there are your teammates, and you should treat them with respect. Treat them as you would your classmates when working through a problem set. Don't be dominated by others. Get your points across, but don't bother others in a positive and civil manner. Persuade them to look at a different point of view. If you think they might be wrong, don't call them out or embarrass them. It all boils down to your fit, communication skills, respect for others, empathy, and teamwork. Scenario 5. You're shown into a conference room where 3 other candidates join you. The group is given a written case and 60 minutes to design a presentation. There is a computer in the room, but the only program on it is PowerPoint. The recruiter sits in the corner of the room and watches the dynamics unfold. Who becomes the leader and how did they become the leader? Did it happen naturally or was it forced upon the group? Who does the quant stuff? Who does the PowerPoint design? Are there discussions, arguments, or fist fights? When your team is ready to present, 2 other consultants join in and your team presents the case. The only requirement is that each of you speaks for 5 minutes. Now, 1, 2, or all of you might get called back for the next round. While you act as part of a team during the presentation of the case, you are each judged individually. How do you become a leader in a situation like that? The best way to take charge is to assign positions. Say, who is the finance keeper? Who knows PowerPoint really well? Allocate positions based on strengths. Assign roles that include who opens the presentation, who closes, and who is the timekeeper. The downside of this is that you get stuck with whatever's left. But remember, the recruiter is watching, and you have already made a big present impression. Also, determine up front how you're going to make a decision. Do all of you have to agree or just a majority? Presentation cases. You are at home, minding your own business, when you get a call from a recruiter from your favorite consulting firm. She says, everyone loved you. We want you to come back for the final round. Can I come in at 4 p.m. tomorrow? Of course. Good. At 4 p.m. today, you'll receive an email containing a case. You have 24 hours to research and solve the case. You wanted to put together a 15-minute presentation to be given to senior management. Prepare to be clear. This is just like a case competition. How your PowerPoint skills. Spend a lot of time in the defense of your answer. Refer to case in point, case competitions for detailed information on how to create a winning strategy presentation. Written and video game interviews. Exercises. McKinsey now requires that some candidates take a written exercise. The test is testing problem solving in a written format. Folks will be surprised that the straight quant questions are the minority. It's not like a jury contest, explains the senior McKinsey recruiter. The bulk of it involves making judgment calls, recommendations based on information available to you at that point. The recruiter adds, the exercise is supposed to feel like a case interview, but with multiple choice responses. Last year, the McKinsey problem solving test contained 26 questions and candidates had an hour to complete it. Candidates receive a bit more information about the business, the environment, and the problem with each question. Students can bring in calculators, scratch paper. The test was developed internally by McKinsey and validated by Applied Psychology Techniques, Inc. APT. It was fun. Now that it's over, recounts a non-MBA Harvard graduates where there are some ratios and percentages, a couple of formulas, but nothing too overwhelming. Also, a few charts are used to present some of the information, but again, fairly basic in my opinion. A McKinsey recruiter said, you need to be comfortable with calculating some percentages, basic equations, understanding relationships between data, but nothing terribly advanced. Some international offices have a math section that one student says is more like the GMAT than the GRE. You have 18 questions and 30 minutes to complete them. You start with probability and it gets harder from there. Recounts a Harvard graduate student. The McKinsey recruiter explains the resulting score is used as one more data point on problem solving for the interviewers to refer to if they have concerns or opposing reads. There is no magic or required score, and performance in face-to-face interviews is of greater importance to us. BCG also had a test which can be administered either online or a paper copy in the US and most of Europe. The test is administered online. The test is 23 questions after 45 minutes. Students tell me that time is a consideration. That flipping back and forth between pages only is a time consuming is sometimes confusing. The test case is about one company, so you'll have to often go back into the case to get information. It's basically broken down into three parts: math and word problems, about 40% of the test, logic and data interpretation, 35%, reading and comprehension, 25%. Like a case interviewer, you are not allowed to use a calculator. One MBA told me that, but they are testing your ability to do calculations quickly and accurately. How do you handle time pressure? BCG is also testing reaction time, thought process, and memory. The scoring system awards you 3 points for a correct answer and 0 points if you don't answer. But if you are penalized 1 point for a wrong answer, therefore, don't pick answers randomly if you start running out of time. Video games. In the last several, McKinsey also asked students to create an online video game. The firm is working with Embellas to create game-based tests that measure perspective, employees' decision-making, adaptability, and critical thinking. The goal is to deliver a quantitative picture of how an applicant thinks. The skills they're testing are how quickly can you synthesize a lot of information and data and understand how it applies to the overall question. Part of it thinking ahead and planning a strategy to make it successful. The video games are ecologically themed. You are on an island where you will be presented with different scenarios, each depicting a natural environment under stress. In one part of the island, you will have to save a native species from an impending natural disaster. In another, you'll be instructed to create a coral reef ecosystem that could withstand evaluated levels of toxicity. An example would be you were presented with a lot of data about different aquatic species and what their needs were, including nutrition, water temperature, amount of sunlight, and what other species, both plant and animal, and they could coexist with or feed off of or fed on by. You will need to choose a collection of species that would create a self-sustaining ecosystem. To prevent applicants from gaming the system, or no two candidates, test takers, experience the game test the same way. There are tens of thousands of variations of each scenario, each at the same level of difficulty. There is no way prepared. You will need to improve. You feel as if you're playing a video game and might forget that it's a test. A student told me that the major challenge was being given many data points and deciding which were essential to use move forward to a for a particular scenario, reading graphs. One of the biggest changes we've seen in case interviewing is the increased use of graphs. You would be given charts sometimes at the outset of the case, sometimes they're slipped into the middle of the case, changing the dynamic of the question. You are expected to analyze them quickly, extract the most important, and then apply it to your answer all the while drawing meaningful insights. It is easy to get overwhelmed. 11 different types of graphs are used in determining consulting and case interviews, and you should be familiar with all of them. So many students will make the mistake of just walking the interviewer through the graph. While it's most helpful to make sure you're interpreting the graph correctly, it is more important to analyze that information. If you get a chart that shows revenue over a 3 year period, it's not interested that the revenue has grown from $1 million to $180 million or $30 million. Remember, you want to quantify related numbers as percentages. You need to see that revenue has grown 20%. Consultants like to put things into perspectives. Why have revenue grown 20% while profits have increased only 12%? If you're given multiple charts, you need to make the connection between it to build on each other or contradict your assumptions. To find your graph analytics, look at the graphs printed in the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, and draw some conclusions. Then read the article and compare your thoughts with the main points of the article. To hone your graph analysis skills, read case and point graph analysis for consulting and case interviewing. Let's just uh, solve this book. This is actually a really good book, baby. Right? Right, guys? All of you management consultants here. It's actually a really nice book, I might say. Right? You guys might be having loads and loads of kind of how to crack the interview, right? This is actually good. I will. So any of you guys who are actually interested in doing case study questions or practicing interviews with me? Hmm. I guess that book. Oh, here it is. Just a sec. Just a sec. Just a sec. Just a sec. So in this continuation of the things, there are this. It's actually the graph and there is another twist, making slides and graphs. The recruiter hands you a few pages of data and asks that you create on paper 3 or 4 PowerPoint slides, one of which should be a graph. You're then expected to present these slides during the case as you of which should be a graph. You're then expected to present these slides during the case as you would during a presentation to a client. Plus silence. One of the presentations or one of the questions I'm asked most often is about silence. Is it ever okay to be silent? Writing down your answer while having some thoughts or drawing a paper or decision trees. It is not okay to be silent when you're just thinking while staring out the window or looking down at your shoes. That would be like, would take a turn of an awkward interview. Particularly in the beginning of the case, if the interviewer gives you the case and you just sit there thinking you've lost your momentum, you're sitting dead in the water like a crocodile. So if you get stuck during a case and the interviewer doesn't ask you a question to help you along, there are a few things you can do. First, take a moment to recap where you've been. Chances are you've either gone into too much detail or now stuck in the mud, or you went off on a tangent. Recapping pulls you out of the mud and back above the trees. So remember, for the most part of you want the case from a macro point of view. Many times as you recap, you can see where you got off track. So second thing you got to do is go back and look at the information that the interviewer gave you. Information that originally seemed irrelevant often becomes relevant as you work through the case, because when you read something many times, it will give you the notion where you will kind of understand some deeper meanings, because you will then be able to understand the meaning between the lines of the things. So third, quickly run through the 5 C's: client, company, cost, channels, competition in your head to see if there is something obvious that you missed. Finally, if you're still stuck, ask for help. There is no shame in asking for help. If we were working on a project together, I would much rather have you ask me for help than have you waste a lot of time banging your head against a wall. But I wouldn't recommend asking for help for more than once. The trouble with math, there will be math. There are 3 kinds of people in the world: those good at math and those who are not. So wait, what? Sometimes it will be a little, sometimes a lot, but nothing that you haven't seen before. The most common math you'll see in a case interview are percentages, ROI, break-evens, weighted averages, net present value, and multiplication and division with lots of zeros. The big difference is that you can't use a calculator. The 2 reasons they make you do a math without a calculator are to see how you think and to see if you think. How do you think? So I've seen students do the same math problem different ways. Do you use scientific notation? Do you turn everything into a fraction? The interviewer is curious about how you got about solving the problem. Here is also looking to see if you take shortcuts. So an example might be the European pet industry was 30 billion euros last year. It is expected to grow 5% a year every year for the next 5 years. What is going to be 5 years from now? So when I used to give that case live, and students would figure out 5% of euros, $30 billion, and add them together and then calculate 5% of the new number, and so on for the next 4 years. So no one wants you to do the same calculation 3 or 4 times, but you could say you've done this. And the market is growing 5% a year every year for the next 5 years. That's 25%. But I need to take compounding into consideration, so I know that is going to be more than 25%, but to less than 30%. My best guess is around 28%. So I'm going to calculate 30 times 1.28 and get 38.4 euros. So if you think, I don't care whether you are an applied math undergrad or have a PhD in string theory, most students have a trouble with zero. So if you multiply 2 numbers together and answer is supposed to be 320 billion, you tell me it is 3.2 billion, and 3.2 billion makes no sense at all, it's going to raise some eyebrows, because it is showing me that you're not thinking before you speak. And if you do that in something as important as an interview, what will you do in front of a client? I can't trust you, and if I can't trust you, I'm not going to hire you. A good rule of thumb is that whenever you do calculation, ask yourself, does this number make sense? If yes, then say yes. If no, then go back and recalculate, because you know that you're going to make you calculate, recalculate. So once you say it, you can't unring the bell. Study the following table. You have to be familiar with your zeros. So it's 10 into 10 is 100, 100 into 100 is 10,000, 1,000, 10,000. So it's like kind of like, an abacus table that you can see, because it has the beads lined up in the same way as if they are just lining here. So there is a difference between private math and public math. So with private math, you are at home with a calculator, all is right with the wall. With public math, there's no calculator, and then if you're sitting 2 feet away from you, watching every digit you write down, it is a very intimidating process. You want to get into the habit of talking to your interviewer through your thought process by explaining what you are going to do, then doing it. Then if you make it a mistake, she can correct you immediately. If you go off and do your math by yourself, come back and say that the answer is 600 million, then TVS says no, it isn't. Then you don't know where you made the mistake. You'll have to go back at the beginning of the calculation, and no one wants to do that. Below are some math questions to do in your head. A. The total budget market is $170 million and our sales are $30 million. What percentage of the market share do we hold? Our total manufacturing costs are $20 million. With that, we can make 39,379 units. What is our approximate cost per unit? Our total cost is $75,000. Labor cost make up 25% total. How much are our labor costs? You brought a stock of $36 a share. Today it jumped 6%. How much is your stock worth? You raised $3.5 million for a startup. Your commission is 2.5%. What's your commission in dollars? What's 7 times 45? The number of current outstanding shares for UKL Inc. is 41084,000. Institutional investors hold 25171,000 shares. What is the approximate percentage of shares held by institutions? Price change, percentage change. You have to be knowing that $27, $0.54 change. What is the percentage change that has happened here? If that much change happens into the price. Banana Republic makes 14% of Gap's estimated $16 billion in sales. What are BR sales? Europe's population is approximately 740 million. By 2020, the European Union population is expected to drop to 700 million. What percentage change is that? Go figure. Try to figure some of the percentages in your head and then work out the others without a calculator. Round up the answers as you go during a case question. Wrote nothing. But nothing, there are from a fifth grade math test 60% of 70, 25% of 184, 68% of 68, 12% of 83, 23% of 60, 27% of 50. About 18%, about $500. These are the answers that you have to actually write on when you're practicing. Here are some formulas you should know inside and out. Net income is equal to revenue minus expenses, break-even points in units, fixed cost is equal to divided by price minus variable cost, break-even point in price, total fixed cost divided by production cost unit, volume plus variable cost per unit. Profit margin, net income divided by revenue, ROI, equal to profit from investment divided by investment cost. Compound annual growth rate, final value divided by the initial value. Raise the result to the power of 1 divided by the number of years. Contribution margin, revenue upon unit, variable cost per unit. Notes design. Take notes during the case interview. While there is no standard for note taking, the landscape format has become the norm. The first page of notes is divided into two sections, one third, two thirds. The left hand section is where you write down the question. The problem statement for this case is that the CEO of Coors is thinking of entering the bottled water market. Is that a good idea? So you draw a line, put the object across the top, then lay out your structure. If you ask type my questions, you can write the answers in the left hand column underneath the original question. Spring enter bottled water market entry, yes or no. So that's how you draw the chart. Market entry, yes or no. Increase revenues by 50% in 5 years. Who's why enter? Size and revenue and trends. Products, production, brand distribution, customers, weighted average, weighted cost, I guess. And market size, growth rate, customer, current market, major players, market share, product differentiation, barriers, entry, yes. Start from scratch, acquisition, joint venture, no alternative plan. The use of plain white printed paper is fine. However, some consulting firms prefer that you use graph paper. There are several reasons for this. Graph paper makes it easier to draw your notes. Be visual with your notes. Draw boxes, graphs, arrows, decision trees, value chains, and flowcharts. When appropriate, turn your notes towards the interviewer to explain your thought process. It makes them feel more like a team member and less like an interviewer. This is huge, so don't forget to do it. Graph people line up your zeros. There is a lot of math in these questions and you can't use a calculator. It's not always easy to tell when you are off by a zero when your answer has 8 zeros at the end of it. Graph paper organizes your notes. Well organized notes make it easier for the interviewer to follow. When he isn't looking into your eyes, he's looking at your notes to see what you wrote down because he knows what you should be writing down. In addition, there is a good chance the interviewer will correct your notes at the end of the interview. He uses the notes as one more data point. What you should write down, how did you write it, how did you do your math, can he read your handwriting? When it comes time for the case portion of the interview, rip out 5 pages of paper and number them. You can do this before the interview to save them and look well organized. Remember to write on one side of the page. Flipping pages back and forth can be disruptive and makes it hard for the find important data at glance. Using bullet points will make your notes seem better organized and make it easier to go back to find information. Star or highlight important points that you think will make the summary. This way, points will jump out at you when it comes time to summarize them. Summarize the case. As you fill up the pages while leaving plenty of white space on your notes, spread your notes out in front of you. That way, you can see the whole case at a glance. You want to know, check the first page of notes from time to time. There's a lot of important information on the page. Some of it is immediately relevant. Some is more put there to draw you off track. Other information will become relevant as you move through the case. Some students use a separate sheet of their math. That way, your main notes stay clean and linear. If you do use a separate sheet, make sure you label each calculation so you can tie it back into the case and not be left looking at a page full of random calculations. Often the interviewer will hand you a chart. Always ask for permission before you write the chart. As strange as it may seem, sometimes interviewers slow up with only one copy of a chart. Idea box. After hearing the initial problems, the candidates will often think of an idea, solution, or strategy that seems inappropriate to state at the beginning of the case for fear that the interviewer might think that you are shooting from the hip and not analyzing the problem. Candidates write it down in their notes and then often forget about it during the case. Even if it becomes relevant, they wind up kicking themselves because they had the solution but forgot about it. I tell students to draw an idea box on the first page of their notes. If anything pops into your head, write it in the idea box, then you know where it is, and you'll get it in the habit of checking the box when you review first page of notes, which you should do several times during the case. Recommendations, summaries, and the final slide. In most cases, you will be asked to either make a recommendation or summarize the case. If you're asked to make a recommendation, the interviewer will either say, take a moment to finalize your recommendation, or the CEO just walked into the room, give her your recommendation, in which case you have zero time to think about it. Recommendations. So if the interview allows you to take a moment, you can usually take 15 to 90 seconds to do your final analysis, put your recommendation on a separate sheet of paper and turn it over the interviewer, much like you did at the beginning of the case with your structure. Make it visual, see below. If you have time, use pie charts to indicate the likelihood that a risk is going to happen, the severity if it does, or use decision trees. The idea is to bring your interviewer forward to go over it with you, thus making you feel like a client. If you can end the case that the interview with the interviewer feeling like a client, it doesn't get much better than that. Many sins will be forgiven if they feel like a client in the head. So there is some sort of a chart. So there is a new equipment, why big investment, take change to find. This is like kind of a short one that you've made yourself. So these are the kind of presentation interviewer you have to just like you have to again frame it in your head like this is supposed to be a random thing, but see how to get a job. We are still like kind of planning it through. So can you believe like how much of it is already pre-planned that we all are experiencing? So there is a lot of thought going on to the things that we kind of encounter in our lives. So that's really important. When you're ready, lead with recommendation. State a clear yes or no. Yes, they should enter the market, or no, they shouldn't buy that piece of machinery. Be definitive. Do not say I think. If a recommendation is a no, then you should come up with an alternative plan to help the company reach its goal. Regardless of your decision, state it with confidence. Do not hedge your answer. That's the kiss of death. Pick one side of the other and defend it. There is no need to offer a backstory. The interviewer knows the backstory. Make a recommendation, yes or no, then tell the interviewer why, the reasons behind the decision, state and prioritize risk based on impact and likelihood of occurrence. Lay out the next steps for the short term and the long term. Once you lay out the next steps, simply add and we can help you with that. This allows the interviewer that you understand how it all works, that consultants are always looking for more work, and that your recommendation is more likely to be successful if you are there to help implement it. Also offer recommendations that are implementable in a relatively short period of time, between 18 and 24 months, unless otherwise stated. Have reasonable budgets and that move the needle. If your idea increases profits by $10 million, that's great. If your company has profits of $50 million, but not so great if it has profits of $10 billion, be careful of brand schemes. Most important, you need to sell your recommendation. You need to close the deal. If you spend 40 minutes listening to the problem and coming up with the solution, if the interviewer doesn't buy your recommendation, the chances of you moving on are a lot less. Be prepared for the interview to come back to you and say, let me tell you why you were wrong. If he comes back with an argument that brings up something that you didn't consider, it's okay to admit that you were wrong. I didn't think about the inventory issue. Now that I'm considering, I think you're right. There's no shame admitting you were wrong. When he doesn't want you to do is change your answer because he told you that you were wrong, or to defend an answer that you know is wrong because you don't want to admit it. Corporations hire consulting firms because consultants are objective, and if you're defending an answer that if you're wrong, you're not objective. Some case prep books imply that a recommendation really doesn't matter because the interviewer has already made up his mind at that point. But it is true that interviewers form an opinion from the moment they meet you. You have 45 to 60 minutes to either substantiate the good or change the bad. I can't tell you the number of rote pedestrian recommendations I hear. If I give the same case to 5 students and they all give me the same recommendation, and how am I choose who gets the job? The recommendation allows you to stand out, to be creative, to differentiate yourself from the rest, and to close the deal. Recommendation recap. Put a recommendation on a separate sheet of paper and make it clear. Turn your recommendation toward the interviewer. Deal with the recommendation of backstory. Be definitely stick with confidence. Don't hedge your answer. If your recommendation is a no, then you should come up with an alternative plan to help the company reach its goal. Tell the interviewer why, the reasons behind your decision. State and prioritize risk based on impact and likelihood of occurrence. Offer recommendations that are implementable in a relatively short period of time, but have reasonably purchased or creative and that move the needle. Self your Sell your recommendation close with, and we can help you with that. Oh, no, 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 no. Okay, sell your recommendation, close the deal. Close with, and we can help you with that. Prepare for the interviewer to come back to you and say, "Let me tell you why you're wrong." Defend your answer. Summaries. Often you will be asked to summarize the case. You have zero time. You need to give the summary almost immediately. Hopefully, you highlighted the key points in your notes as you work through the case. A good summary takes anywhere from 30 seconds to 90 seconds at the most. It is not a rehash of everything you spoke about. It is a short recap of the problem and two or three main points or recommendations that you want the interviewer to remember. Final slide. In some cases, particularly those that ask for a list of numbers, the interviewer wants you to figure out are those comparing two or more strategies, ideas, or options using the same criteria. You can create the final slide right at the beginning of the case. Almost no one remembers to do this. So if you do think of it, you'll score big points with the interviewer. On a sheet or separate sheet of paper, draw a chart listing the product or markets, whatever it is that you are comparing, and below that the criteria. As you calculate the numbers, fill them in on the final slide. This keeps all relevant information in one place and makes it easier for the interviewer to follow. Think of it as a scorecard. Scorecard. Once all information is filled in, turn the final slide toward the interviewer and walk him through it. This is the best summary. It is similar to the final slide of a deck that a consultant would present to a client. Case journal. I had a student who decided she wanted to do consulting, but she had no business background. Her first attempt at a mock case interview with me was a disaster. That day, she started a journal. For every live case she did with me, her classmates and alumni, she did around 30 live cases, and with every case that she read, about 80 cases, she wrote down the problem, the solution, and the most important, which she hadn't thought of. She constantly reviewed it so that when she didn't think of naturally soon become second nature to her. She also recorded structure, concepts, ideas, and strategies. When she had spare moments between classes or bus rides, she would flip through her journal. When she had read articles in the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg Business Week, or McKinsey Quarterly, she would add it to her journal. It never left her side. You should write it down. When she read articles in the Wall Street Journal, just a second. Hmm. I don't know, my laptop, I don't know why, but my laptop is kind of like, oh my god, it's kind of doing this thing. And a student decided she wanted to do consulting, but she had no business background. Her first admit this. Okay. The student ended up at a top firm and took the journal with her. With every engagement, she learned something new and added it. When she and her co-worker sat around brainstorming problems, she would flip through her journal and throw out ideas, which often sparked discussions. I saw her 5 years after she had graduated, and she still had a journal with her. Although it was as beaten up as Indiana Jones, it held just as many twists. She was headed to a new job, and the journal was the first thing she packed. Since then, whenever I speak at schools, I recommend creating a journal. Besides keeping all your notes in one place, it becomes a single scope, single source for case minute that is also extremely helpful for your classes. If you're truly serious about case interviewing, then you will continue to read and practice cases all summer long. Recruiting events start as soon as you get back to campus. So if you take the time over the summer to practice, life is going to be easier in the fall. Finally, so there are total 7 sections in this book, and then we finally made it to the fourth. I didn't think we just kind of we actually doubled the number of pages we read in this stream, and we're going to continue because we have to complete this book harshly today. We cannot wait anymore because there are a lot of things to read. There are a lot of things to do, and we're gonna head and we're gonna do it together, and we're gonna grow, and we're gonna get that job. Okay, so this is the thing. And what else do you want me to showcase? So let's just take 10 minutes break. I want to eat something. I'm really tired of speaking so much. Reading 32 pages just really soaking my throat. So let's just 10 or 20 minutes or 25 minutes or so break in this stream. Let's take a break.